thank you. We've got a great panel for discussion of the politics of redistricting, and we're going to talk about maybe some specifics of what we'll be doing when we talk about this, or when they talk about this in the legislature in a couple of years. Let me introduce our esteemed panelists. Starting here at my far right is Senator Ronnie Johns, a Republican of Sulphur, who represents Senate District 27, which is part of Calcasieu Parish, and he has been serving that district since 2012 and had prior service in the State House, in the House of Representatives during the 2001 redistricting cycle. So it brings some of that historical perspective to our conversation. Next to him, we have Senator Ed Price, a Democrat from Gonzales, who represents Senate District 2, which contains parts of 8 parishes, and he was elected in a 2017 special election, having served also in the State House prior to that. Next to me here is Representative Marcus Hunter, a Democrat of Monroe, who represents House District 17 in Ouachita Parish. And he started this term in 2012, and if you believe what you read on the internet, represents a district that was sort of a creation of the last redistricting cycle. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And of course, next to him, Representative Julie Emerson, a Republican of Carencro, who represents House District 39, parts of Lafayette and St. Landry Parish, and her term started in January 2016. I'm mentioning where they're from to give you a sense of the geography represented on our panel. So let's start off with some questions, and I'd like to start with talking about the process. And so because he's got some historical perspective on this, I thought we could start with Senator Johns to talk a little bit about how you anticipate the process. I'd like each of the panelists to talk about how you anticipate the process will work in 2021, and talk about some things like what kind of expertise you anticipate consulting, how much citizen input you'd like to see in the process, as well as how much transparency versus kind of closed negotiation you anticipate seeing in the process. So, Senator Johns.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm not quite sure why I'm here, because in my 18 years of serving in the Louisiana Legislature, I've actually only been through redistricting one time, and that was in 2001. 2011, I term limited out of the House in 2008 and actually set out for 4 years, so I actually missed the 2011 redistricting cycle. But I will tell you that as explaining to a few people earlier today, back in the 01 cycle, I think it was a completely different time in history of how redistricting was done compared to how it was done in 2011 and how it's going to be done in 2021. Back in 01, it was definitely not a partisan issue. We did not have partisan politics to any great degree back then like we do have today, or that we probably had in 2011, or that we definitely will have in 2021. As far as how the process will work, I will share with you, I think it will probably be the most transparent redistricting process that our state has ever seen. And I say that is because of technology today. Everything that is done today is absolutely almost instant, and it's because of this right here. It's because of constituents back home who have access to the internet, our website, and who follow the process on a daily basis. When I came to the legislature in 1996, if the media did not report on a particular issue or a particular bill or a particular vote, it may be days or weeks before our constituents back home actually knew anything about it. But today, it's absolutely instant. And I tell a very true story, and I shared it with some of our Senate staff just a little while ago. On the Senate floor last year, as an amendment was being proposed, I got a text message from a constituent back home, very bright individual who was following the process on the internet, and he said, that amendment, the language of that amendment will not work. Legally, you can't do that, blah, 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 blah. And I took that to the staff immediately, and they looked at it and they said, you know what? He is right. And so that actually happened, but the point I'm making is that everything is instant today. So when we get to 2021 in this process, it's going to be, in my opinion, very transparent. People across this state who have interest in what we're going to do in terms of redistricting will follow it. They're going to follow it daily. They're going to follow it by the minute, and you're going to see a lot of input from our constituents, which I welcome. That is exactly what we want. We want to hear from our constituents and how it affects them and how the process is going to work. I will tell you, on the Senate side, we have incredible staff that, from a historical point, know a lot about redistricting, and I'm sure there will be outside counsel also that will bring expertise to us in what we're going to do. But I hope I've somewhat answered your question, and be glad to come back to any of it a little bit later.
Okay, thank you. Senator Prince.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and I too am very happy to be here with you this afternoon. Senator John asked why he didn't know why he was here. Well, I'm a last-minute replacement for Representative Melinda White, who unfortunately is having some health issues with her mother, so she couldn't be here. So I was just asked to step in. Also, unlike him, he's only had one redistricting. As a member of the school board at the local level, I've had 3 reapportionment plans. So a little bit there that going through those processes when you're doing it, there's going to always be some movement back and forth as to one, and the thing is the politics of redistricting, protecting incumbency, whether or not you want to say it or not. It's just a part of the process, and that's still going to be, because people always want to make sure that they protect their area, and even the public, when they look at what you're doing to reapportion, and on the school board, they would always say, are you still going to be my school board member? We want you to be my school board member. So they have input that way also. But I think the process that's coming up, as he said, it's going to be transparent. One of the things that is definitely different is technology. You can draw a map now, and I can remember in my first reapportionment plan, we had pens and pencils and maps, and we were coloring in certain areas and precincts. That is no longer there. Now you just click on a button and say, okay, let's move this precinct here, and it pops in. So the transparency will be there, the technology because of that. But I welcome also as much input as possible, and always did, to get people involved. When we did reapportionment, it was always open to the public at an open meeting of the board when we were drawing the map. So anybody that wanted to be there could always be there. And I think this process will continue even at the state legislative level, where we will discuss certain issues, but always bring it before the public to say, this is what we're doing, this is how we think it should be done. And with staff and demographers and those individuals out there that's always looking at it, I think we're going to have a very transparent process. I look forward to it and to being a part of it.
Representative Hunter.
Good afternoon. I echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and I'm sure Representative Emerson, when I say that the politics of redistricting will be something that we can all look forward to. but it's going to take a lot of effort. I'm probably the only one from North Louisiana, and I often say when I go to the well that the farther you are from Baton Rouge, the worse you get treated. And it's just how I feel. It's an opinion of mine, but it's evident in how some of the laws are drafted and to an extent how some of the districts are drawn. We do have one of the largest landmass Senate districts. We do have probably one of the worst congressional districts drawn, which is the 5th. I know this because I ran for Congress, and I can assure you that Monroe has nothing, no common interest with Kentwood. I appreciate Britney Spears and the people from Kentwood, but we are not in the same media market. We do not have the same radio stations. We don't have the same news or topics. I mean, quite honestly, you all have Mardi Gras in the South. It's not even a state holiday in North Louisiana. So I think with what we're trying to do moving forward, it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of understanding. I got a great appreciation for the state as a whole, not only with things like Leadership Louisiana, but also running for Congress. I learned a lot about other colleagues in other areas of the state. And I think that that's where the concomitant relationship between transparency and citizen involvement will probably make its biggest impact. I agree with Senator Johns. There's no way we're going to be able to hide this process, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't think there's going to be an effort by any of my colleagues to do so. But there's going to have to be an increased effort from the citizenry to come and say, okay, this is what we expect in a particular district. And you're going to have to be honest. I mean, you're going to have to put some of your party politics aside. You cannot have an 88% district anymore. Because I think when you get that, when you as a Democrat agree to have someone get an 88% district, what you're all but guaranteeing is that you're going to have a very, very right-wing district somewhere in the state. And it's going to be a pretty solid district for the remainder of your term. So that means you're going to have somebody who's making a commitment to their constituents that's going to be, diametrically opposed to you, which means the conversations will be harder when you go to the Capitol, which means we'll have a pre-special session, a regular session, and a post-special session. So think about my life. I've only been an elected official 6 years, and the last 3 years I've been married. I've had Valentine's Day, I've had to spend it with my colleagues instead of my wife. So I'm fully expecting to get served with divorce papers at some point.
I'll be looking for the Valentine candy this year.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Because I think we're going to be here again, and these type of issues will come up. But I look forward to the challenge, and I think we all signed up for it, but we do need your input, and I think that that is the most important part. We did get elected, but this is something that will affect us all for at least the next 10 to 15 years, and possibly longer, because we have to look at the tenure, the seniority that we're losing, not only in congressional seats, but in other seats as well.
Thank you so much, Martin, and thank you everyone for being here. Everyone's talked about transparency along the way, and I think we can always get better, but thankfully I think we are getting more and more transparent in the political process just because of the emergence of technology and 24/7 news cycle, and look forward to even more of that. I think things like this, of course I wasn't in the legislature in 2010, 2011 when we did redistricting the last time, but anybody that was there, I would wonder if they ever had any type of summit like this with information and input from the public. So I think that this is a great start. You're talking about 3 years out. It's tremendous that this many people are involved and interested in the process that we'll be undertaking. I think that the difference from 2010, 2011 is when you'll probably be able to download an app on your phone that you can just redraw districts right here on your phone. So you'll have so much input from the public of coming and saying, hey, look, I think maybe this map could be a little bit better. You'll have much more input in the different committee hearings. And then as far as outside counsel goes, I think it's extremely important that we do, obviously consult with attorneys. You see a lot of cases going before the Supreme Court involving gerrymandering and the fairness there. So obviously, in the next 3 years, laws could change a lot, and we're definitely going to need to seek some counsel in that regard.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to kind of dig into the nitty-gritty of the politics of redistricting with the next line of questioning. I'll start with Senator Price and kind of come back around to Senator Johns on this one. Let's talk about the kinds of collaboration and competition you see brewing in the legislature that might play out in the next redistricting cycle. In our morning panel featuring some of your colleagues, Representative Smith talked a lot about partisan competition over redistricting in the House, and Senator Reiser and Senator Chabert talked about sort of more regional and kind of rural-urban kinds of competition and compromise in the Senate, and not as much partisanship. As you think about what's brewing in the conversations you have in the current legislature, what kinds of patterns of competition and compromise can you see emerging in the redistricting process? What are we going to be talking about? Are we going to be talking about a partisan conversation? Are we going to be talking about rural-urban? What do you envision, Senator Price?
Thank you. Just having left the House this past year, and now in the Senate, and I can say I'm glad to be there, there was, and no doubt, more partisanship in the House than in the Senate that I've witnessed. For whatever reason, the House has kind of gotten into that stalemate with each other about whether or not we're going to move certain things one way or the other, and it's based a lot on partisan politics. I would think, though, that along the way that we can come to some type of an agreement that we need to move forward, and without all the partisan politics. Now, I'm not going to say it's not going to happen because I'm very familiar with a lot of the House members that are there. And even though re-election is coming up, and I think there are some term limits that's going to happen, hopefully that can change some of the image of what people are now talking about, how partisan the Louisiana House of Representatives is. However, there will always be, from my experience, some incumbency protection, people who want to do things certain ways. And of course, there will be probably a push to keep certain seats, whether it's Republican, Democrat, whatever, in that hole. I mean, let's face it, when you can have 60 members of one party running things, it always, to them, I'm sure, feels good that, hey, we're in control. But then that becomes an issue because there are certain times when legislation has to be passed and it requires that 2/3 vote, and then the partisan goes the other way and say, regardless of how it affects, I'm not going to give in because you never give in. I think we really have to get away from that. We have to start thinking about the state as a whole and what's best for the state and what's best for the people and your constituency. So everyone at some time or another want to protect their territory and what they're doing, but I do believe we have individuals who can come together and actually say we're going to work together. And whether it be regional, whether it be about what's most affect your district, that is. I represent a district right now in the Senate district that runs along 8 parishes. And commonality, I know Representative Horner talked about Kentwood and Monroe. Well, I go from Gonzales to Thibodeau, and from St. Charles Parish, Kalina to Port Allen. But I do find one thing that's common, and that people want a good life. And I don't care whether it's in the chemical industry, which I represent along the river, or whether it's a farming community from Assumption Parish to Thibodeau. People want one thing. They want a good life, and they want a way to make a good living. And that's what we have to put forth when we are in this meeting and we're talking. What are we going to do for education so that everyone can have that opportunity, a quality life? So I'm hoping that we can move forward, and these things that we can put forward when we're talking about this.
I think moving forward, we have to, I think for the citizens, you have to kind of understand how the House and Senate really works. The House is like 105 people yelling at each other in traffic. It's about 210 personalities on any given day. But the Senate is more like 39 people yelling at each other in church. They kind of understand that I really can't cuss you because I know I'm gonna see you after Sunday school. They know they share about 4 or 5 committees, so they have to be a lot more intimate with each other and understand, I'll see you again, you can hurt me a lot more acutely than you can in the house. You could have somebody that come gut your bill and you never see them again for 4 years because they're on retirement committee and you're on a whole different committee in the house. And when you have that type of mindset, kind of moving forward, if we have 60 Republicans, kind of to what Senator Price said, there's going to be some movement in terms of what we intend to do in terms of district drawing. But if you think that the numbers are going to drop from 60 to 40, that's just not going to happen. Realistically speaking, you're going to lose some precincts. You're going to lose some power areas just based on population shifts, kind of what Senator Chabert was talking about earlier. But for the most part, the numbers are going to pretty much remain the same. There's going to be some large-scale changes, but again, that's going to come down to what you as the citizens decide you want. And to his point, we each have very diverse districts within the entire state. And the example I like to give is, I had a mayor who gave a key to the city to Louis Farrakhan. I also represent Duck Dynasty area. I have a redneck parade in my area, which is pretty interesting, for lack of a better phrase. But that's the district that I have. And when I put all these people at the table together, to Senator Price's point, they all want what's best for Louisiana. We may have different roads. And I always tell people, coming from North Louisiana, you can take I-55 and you can get to New Orleans, or you can go 61. You're going to get to New Orleans if you really want to get there. It's just a matter of which road you're going to take and how many speed traps you're going to go through. So I think when you have that type of mindset, it works for me. And I think that moving forward with redistricting, it's going to work because we have a lot more mature, moderate people who really just want what's best for Louisiana. Now, yeah, we're going to be a little partisan. Yeah, that's understood. That's just going to come with the territory. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to be as difficult as in times past because people are starting to be more knowledgeable of, for me, the population shifts and how some of these districts, you're just not going to be able to come and say, I want a large, heavy, populated minority district and think that you're going to be able to maintain that in this administration or in the next administration at that time. So.
Well, Mark has always loved the pictures you paint. And Ed, I'm glad that you love in the Senate, but we do miss you in the House, and I'm still on Team House over here. So. But any time that you have 144 different people and personalities and ideas and thought processes, especially when it comes to a major piece of legislation like redistricting, you are going to get some contentious moments. But I think that when it comes to redistricting, more so than the partisan contention, I think you have a lot of geographical contention as well. That's been mentioned here before, and frankly, when you go back to the last redistricting, you had this massive population shift because it was the first redistricting post-Katrina. So you had a lot of changes in the New Orleans area. You also have a consistent shift with people moving a little bit more south, and we do love our North Louisiana counterparts, but I think that's always kind of a debate back and forth. So you have a lot of things at play. You have way more than just partisanship. You have a lot of things at play that can get contentious. But I think like anything else, you have to have some collaboration at some point because you have to get the votes to pass bills, and people have to work together. And I think that's the great part about the legislative branch is, you might have some people that are more powerful than others as far as different leadership positions, but at some point you do have to come together and work together to get things passed.
Senator Jones.
Thank you, and don't let Representative Hunter fool you. He said he'd only been in the legislature 6 years. He actually grew up in a legislative family. His father and I served together for many, many years, and he was a great legislator. So, Marcus, you learned from one of the best. So don't let him fool you. I would tell you that I think my colleagues from this morning probably hit the nail on the head that there is some major difference between the House and the Senate in terms of partisanship. You've seen the Senate be a lot more willing to work together on some very, very key issues. And the House, just a little, not that they don't work together, they absolutely do, but there is some degree of more partisanship there. I have friends who come to the Capitol, they go to the House side, and they watch them for an hour, and they come over to the Senate side, and say, how can it be so loud and crazy and wild over there? And then you come over to the Senate side, and it's like Representative Hunter said, being in church. So there is a difference. I will tell you, when it's going to come to reapportionment in 2021, particularly over in southwest Louisiana, you're not going to see that big of a partisanship effort in terms of redistricting. It's basically going to be along geographical lines, along cultural lines to some great extent. I give you a perfect example. I live in Sulphur, Louisiana, but I represent most of Lake Charles. On the House side, the people over in the western part of the district absolutely do not want somebody from Lake Charles being their state representative, nor do people in Lake Charles want somebody from Sulphur being their state representative. So there are dividing lines, I think, in every parish that you're going to see, or every district that you're going to see. I represent, in my particular Senate district, I probably have one of the most diverse Senate districts in the entire Senate. I'm a Republican, but I'm the first Republican to ever serve in my Senate district. It's predominantly Democrat. There are on the Republican and Independent registered voter side pretty much even, but it is still a very conservative and a very moderate Senate district, and so you know, when people look at re-election, they look at things like redistricting. It's going to be based upon representation. So I don't foresee in southwest Louisiana any real efforts or problems from a partisanship standpoint. And I will tell you, there's something else I did mention earlier. We talked about technology, but social media has absolutely taken politics to a whole new level. I was actually in Facebook's headquarters about 6 weeks ago out in San Jose, California. Incredible experience to sit there and watch how it works, the impact that it's making all over this country, and they realized, there were about legislators from about 40 states there, they realized the impact. Facebook realizes the impact that they are having on politics all over this country. It was an interesting day and an interesting dialogue there. So as social media will continue to grow in the next 2 to 3, 4 years, as we get into 2021, you're going to see social media also have a huge impact on what we do.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to get to audience questions, but I want to try to do at least one sort of lightning question, so you can answer this with sort of a brief response if you like. Representative Hunter, let's start with you on this. Are you fundamentally happy with the legislative process that we have tended to have in Louisiana, or do you think there is another one of these alternatives, like a citizen commission or something like that, that would be politically palatable for the state? So, what do you think?
Yes.
Fundamentally happy.
Say it lightly.
Fundamentally happy.
Say it lightly.
Sure, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
And I'm going to be brief. I'm happy with it because I have a big issue with abdicating my legislative authority. The people elected me to do a job. I don't particularly like outsourcing. Certain things we can privatize. I don't particularly think the drawing of districts should be something that we leave solely to a third party, because I think that that's when a lot of financing of it can come into place. I think if we allow for the citizens the people who trusted us to come do our job, we stay in touch with them, And I think that we put the best product out there. But if we say, okay, we're gonna send this to somebody from New York, I mean, I have a hard enough time getting my issues expressed to people from South Louisiana. I don't think a third party from out of state is gonna do any better. So I'll just stick with what I'm doing and maybe it'll work out fine.
One of our colleagues in the House always opens, when he goes to the well and addresses us, he always says, members of the people's house. And I think that's really important because as members of the House, we are the closest thing to a representation of the people. And I think that's really important because when you start talking about independent commissions, of course we all want the process to be fair, but I think that there's so much more to it. You have to see who's appointing these people, are they answerable to the public? So frankly, at this point, having it in the legislative process, that's your direct representatives, and we have a public committee process for a reason. So we will certainly welcome feedback there.
You will never take the politics out of politics. I mean, I think that's a reality. And I know there's been a great amount of discussion about, quote, nonpartisan groups doing redistricting. But ultimately, I think the system that we have right now works. And I think it will actually continue to actually work even better because of the transparency that we're going to go through. But when you get into a quote, appointed commission or appointed group of people, then the question becomes, who appoints them? Is it going to be the governor? Is it going to be the legislature? Is it going to be the leadership of the House or the Senate or whoever? So there's always going to be some special interest in those appointments. But I will share with you, as I close on this particular question, a quote from Churchill. Churchill said, "Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all of those other forms that have been tried." So you don't, I just don't see us reinventing the wheel.
Thank you. And I too am fundamentally happy with what we have, absolutely. But I'm going to say that I'm never, ever going to say never to anything. If there is a way that it can be fundamentally done, what you're talking about, an independent commission or whatever, if the politics of it, as Senator John said, will always be there, and whether it's an independent commission or whether it's the legislative process, there's going to be some politics. But I will never close my eye to a situation that, if I see, could help maybe do something better. I'm not saying that I'm for it, but I will always keep an open mind as to where we're going to go forward and where we may move forward with it. So I am happy with the way it is right now, the legislative process. I do think the people elected me to come and do a job, and if they don't like the job I'm doing, I'll be unelected. But I will leave the door open.
Great, thank you. All right, well, let's take some time with some audience questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and Professor Nathan Calmo will find you and share the mic with you.
Yeah, we've heard a couple of panels of legislators, and, I don't feel represented by my legislators. When donors have more influence over our legislators than voters, which is the current situation. When words like evidence-based and science-based are banned from governmental agencies, I think you've got a lot of fed-up voters. If we're packing districts, we don't have a representative government, and you are not representing the people. And if we have to go to a third party, because, I say follow the money, but I trust evidence-based and science-based, and I don't trust phone news, and I don't trust, and either we're gonna do something about this now, our democracy's lost. Because it's donors who are controlling things. Go to a committee with Lovey there. I mean, the deference Lovey gets is disgusting in the legislature. And y'all have to answer for that. So we're asking you to be bigger than your own personal interests and think about the voters of Louisiana, because you're surely not doing it on the budget.
Anybody want to weigh in on money and the process with redistricting?
I have no problem jumping in front of bullets. I'll say this, I'm disappointed that you feel you don't have someone who listens to you and speaks out on your behalf. And I say that on behalf of all of my colleagues at the legislature, but what I would ask of you to do is put more pressure on your current elected official. Social media is powerful. Lobby does have influence, and people who make donations have influence, but so does the person who camps out in front of an elected official's building. So does the person who takes screenshots in front of the office and say, I'm still waiting on you to come here. We have a meeting for 9:30. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And this process can be very frustrating. I'm an attorney by trade. Drafting laws about legislation, the level of intelligence that you have has nothing to do with getting a bill passed. I tell people this all the time, and I'll say this in front of my colleagues, because I say it publicly and privately. Probably 2/3 of the bills that get passed, most times don't even get read. Most people who stand in front of the legislature to argue a bill, when you get to asking questions, the gentleman or the gentlelady decides to return it to the calendar. Because most of us are given talking points. But I think that's where you come in. And I think Senator Johns made a very good definitive point about that when he said he had a colleague who texted him and told him that, look, that may not be the best thing. That is how representative government works. We are limited by our own intelligence or our own egos. We need to be checked. And you, the citizens, have to do that checking by way of running us out of office, or showing up at our office, or seeing us at church, or seeing us at the grocery store, or cutting us off in traffic. Whatever you got to do to get our attention and keep our attention, do it. And that's how the process works. We come to your churches, we come to your homes, we come to your independent women organizations and your meetings and bid whist and say, we're going to do everything we can if you elect us. And then you may not see us for 3 or 4 years. But if you let us get away with it, we're going to do that. And I hate to be, this blunt about it, but that's what people do. It's a relationship. It's purely transactional. When you feel like you're not getting the return on the investment, either with the budget, either with TOPS, or either with your elected official, change your banker, change your transactions, send them home. You as a citizen have the utmost power to dictate who sits in that seat. There are tons of people who've lost elections who have had large bank accounts. I don't happen to be one of them because I don't really do a great job of fundraising, as you can probably tell why, but that's an entirely different story. But I don't want to just throw it back at your feet, but I just want you to know that you have a lot more power than you sometimes believe. And I know it can be frustrating. Hell, it's frustrating for me to be in the legislature. I feel like I'm hitting my head and wasting my intellectual property 7 out of 10 of the days I'm there. Because when I'm trying to articulate a thought to somebody about a piece of legislation, and I know that answer is an adamant no, before I even begin to dictate to them what good this bill will do for the entire state. I have rallied for entire pieces of legislation over simple things. Should we have clean water? They're like, oh, yeah, but no. So, I don't want you to, I can't tell you how to feel. I learned that from being married. I can't tell you how to feel. I cannot. What I can tell you is it's a frustrating process, but as my wife tells me, the rewards are great. The rewards are great when you know that you can help someone who is going to share your vision for the state of Louisiana. And that's pretty much what we're talking about with redistricting. You want people that's going to share your vision, whatever your vision is for the entire state of Louisiana. Not just your neighborhood, not just your community association, not just your city. It has to be a shared, unified thought for the entire state of Louisiana. When that occurs, we all are better for it. Otherwise, we're gonna sit here and play musical chairs and, you know, take hostages we can't kill come special session.
Another question.
Can I, of course, say very briefly, and I have great respect for your comments. I absolutely do. My 18 years of serving in the legislature, I've heard that many times. But I'm going to assure you one thing. The vast majority of our donors don't vote. It's the people that we represent back home that vote for us and that have put us into a political office. Some people think it's a very glamorous thing that we do, or a very powerful thing that we do. But I can assure you one thing, every one of my colleagues, all 144 of us, have made personal sacrifices to do what we do. Very few people realize the sacrifices that families make in what we do. Now, are there special interest groups out there? Absolutely. But they're spread pretty evenly. I can assure you this. You talk about lobby, they are other special interest groups adversely on the exact opposite side of lobby that are just as powerful. So there is a balance amongst special interest groups. But I can assure you, I'm proud of the fact that there have been times when I have returned money back to a donor. And I've done that, and you can go and you can look at any legislator's campaign finance report and see where their money's coming from. But I have returned money because I have had donors who say, well, you know, if you don't vote for this, they do it in a threatening manner. That's the worst thing you can do to a legislator from a donor. So in a certain respect, I hear you. I see your point. I disagree with parts of it, and I think the vast majority of us do represent our people, and we try hard. So, thank you.
One of the challenges, and they talked about it on earlier panels, to fair redistricting is also a challenge just to how legislation is considered and whether it gets to the floor. And the power to decide who's on the committee and to maybe stack the committee, as was mentioned, I think Pat Smith mentioned it and maybe Norby Chabert did, as far as just getting legislation to the floor for the majority to get to vote one way or the other on the legislation. Are there, in fair districting, if the power stays with the legislature, which it might, and somebody believe it should, are there ways to set rules so that those committees will reflect a fairer representation of the state, or in some way be more neutral than they have been in the past? Because that was a problem, I think, in 2011.
I'll quickly address the fairness of it, and I guess it's come down to what is fair. We all have different philosophies sometimes, so if a bill's come to a committee that I don't necessarily agree with, I don't want it to go to the full house to maybe ballooning or something more. So the process, and that is the process, we have committees, we determine whether or not a bill should come out of committee or whether it should stay in committee, or whether it should get another hearing in committee. So the process is the process, and it is a fair process, because we don't always agree with everything. Does not say that it's not fair. It got a fair hearing in that committee. And yes, sometimes you may think, okay, the committee may be stacked one way or the other and you're not going to get it out. That's absolutely correct. But it's the power that the people have elected those individuals to get there. We have a 60 majority of Republicans in the House and 20-something in the Senate, I believe, or whatever. And if they decide at that point that it's not, then the people themselves need to get involved, elect people and constituents of that belief that they have, and overturn that. But that is the process, and I believe in the democratic process. I mean, this is the greatest country in the world. There's no doubt about it. And we have a process that has not failed us, and I don't think it will. So That's the way the process works. It's not just at the state level, but even at the national level. Do I like everything that's happening in Congress right now? Absolutely not. Am I gonna do something about it? You bet. Because I wanna elect people with my philosophy and who are gonna do the right thing. Whether I can achieve it, we're gonna see. But I'm gonna try like hell to make sure it happens.
And I'll just follow that up with, and they may have spoken about this in the history of redistricting as well. But, you know, the appointments to those particular committees that the bills go through are all made by the Speaker and the President of the Senate. So that's another process to watch. I know those guys, especially when it comes to redistricting, they get plenty of feedback from the particular legislators from around the state to make sure that it's, you know, fair partisan makeup, fair regional makeup, and things of that nature. So, and that's a process that you guys can get involved in as well, as far as feedback. I mean, email the Speaker, email your individual representatives to make sure that that process is transparent too.
And with that, I'm getting a nod that we need to wrap things up for our break and to set up for our next panel. So let's thank our esteemed panelists.